Welcome to Globetrotting with Lynx. I am your host, and I guess I should get the name out of the way right from the start. I'm a science fiction fan, and I was honored with a fictional peerage by a group that I used to run, and that peerage was Lynx. Now I tend to use it in fandom circles, but also as a nickname, as I really like it, and it goes well with my new image from a few years ago. So, with that out of the way, welcome to this podcast video, where I will bring you along on some of my travels from the past and all present travels. This podcast video comes out about once a month. The podcast it's based on comes out about once every 2 weeks and covers everything from amazing locations to cruises to just helpful tips and hints. For those who don't know, I am a travel advisor with Fora, and I love helping others book their own amazing getaways and vacations. So if you like what you see here on this YouTube channel, or here on our podcast, please feel free to shoot me an email at lynx@globetrottingwithlynx.com. That's Lynx. And I will help to make your dreams a reality. So, for this 7th episode, I picked something which is a trip that I recently went on. And I recently went on the Regal Princess. The reason I went on the Regal Princess was because Princess Cruises had a Love Boat-themed cruise. And on board were Bernie Coppell, who played Doc, Ted Lange, who played Isaac, Fred Grandy, who played Gopher, Jill Whelan, who played Vicky Stubing, Lauren Tews, who played Julie McCoy, and Charo, who played both herself and April. The original cast of the Love Boat were also the original christeners of the Regal Princess. So if you follow our podcast, Globetrotting with Lynx, this is the companion to episode 9, which aired back in January. Before we start, I'd like to quickly thank our sponsors, Malbooks and Baronio Productions, for their support in this process. So without further ado, I give you the Love Boat Cruise. So this took place on the Regal Princess, and the Regal Princess is a royal-class ship built for the Princess Cruise Lines by Fincantieri SpA in Monfalcone, Italy, between August of 2012 and March of 2013, when she was launched on the 26th of March. Her original christening was the 5th of November 2014, and her christeners were the original Love Boat crew, so Gavin MacLeod, Bernie Coppell, Fred Grandy, Ted Lange, Jill Whelan, and Lauren Tews. Her maiden voyage was the 20th of May in 2014. In March of 2019, she was involved in a rescue at sea, where she pulled 2 survivors from the Caribbean near Grand Turk, after a private plane had gone down. In May of 2020, a 39-year-old committed what was possibly a suicide while going overboard while the ship was docked in Rotterdam. The ship itself is nice. Unlike Royal Caribbean ships, not all the decks with venues are complete pass-through decks, so that means you either need to go to a different deck or use the outside promenade areas. This isn't a huge issue, but it is something to be aware of, especially if you need accessibility, as the outside areas are a little bit harder to navigate. So the piazza and atrium is the central area on Princess ships. It's basically a large open atrium with venues on either side, and it's fairly close to midships. As a matter of fact, the midships elevators were right next to it. On the Regal Princess, it is 3 decks high, and it's got good seating, especially if what you want is relaxation. The ship isn't that old, having launched in 2013, but it feels even older than ships in other lines, which are older by date. I'm not sure if this is just the aesthetic that Princess is going for, or if it was just that much wear and tear on the ship. The Royal class ships are the main workhorses of the Princess line, so it could be a combination of both. My cabin on board was a nice one. I had booked a deluxe balcony. It is, however, 1/5 to 1/4 smaller than a similar comparable cabin on a Royal Caribbean ship. The bathroom is also about 1/3 smaller. And the shower had a curtain instead of sliding glass doors. The bed was very comfortable, and the curtains do overlap a bit, so the room does get fairly dark when you want to sleep, and they keep the sun out in the morning. As for the balcony, it was fully half the size of a comparable balcony on Royal Caribbean ships. This means that the chairs don't really recline effectively, and there is less space if you are 2 people. Fortunately, for this particular cruise, I was alone. Another thing to consider is that if you don't get Princess Plus, almost everything on board has a cost. This includes a $55 service charge for room service. With Princess Plus, this is waived. Many of the onboard venues are very pleasant. Bellini's is very comfortable. It's located in the piazza on deck 6. It overlooks the atrium, and the seating is fairly intimate, with most tables being for 2 people. Princess Live is a full studio with full production suite. Here they record their daily updates, which are broadcast on your stateroom TVs. These are all recorded in advance of sailing, so there's always a chance that there might be an error in them. Because they're not generally using it as a production studio during the cruise, the venue is mainly used for game show style events, for karaoke, and other such similar events. The casino is kind of cramped. They've squeezed as many of the slot machines in as possible, which limits table space, and the table space is right in the middle of the slot area. It's also one of the only venues on board where smoking is still permitted. Next to the casino is Club 6. This is essentially a sports bar, but slightly more upscale. The TVs here are usually running some kind of game. The seating's actually fairly tight and designed around groups of 4 or 6. Sabatini's is one of the specialty dining options on board. Princess has 3 tiers of dining: complimentary, casual, and specialty, with the last 2 having an additional cost. Although, if you have at least Princess Plus, you get 2 free casual dinings included. Sabatini's is a Frescobaldi cuisine, which is a really fancy way of saying Tuscan. Where it's named after the Frescobaldi family, who had wineries dating back to the 1300s. This is a staple on many Princess ships, and it's often served one night in the main dining room as well. Speaking of wineries, Vines is a wine bar on board. Their selection is both adequate and acceptable, but honestly nothing spectacular. I had actually brought a better bottle of wine on board than what they offered, and if I were to compare with similar venue on Royal Caribbean, which I've cruised on more frequently, this one would fall well short on its selection. Another venue in the atrium is Crooners. This lounge is meant to harken back to the crooners of old. Some of the crooners that some of us may have grown up with. People like Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., among others. The decor is also very 1950s, and there's a piano here where live music happens most evenings. It's also the venue that's used for onboard loyalty gatherings, so it does close for about 2 hours most evenings. The pool deck has a few different food options, with Horizons, which is the buffet, Prego, which is the free pizzeria, and Trident, which is their grill. The food from all 3 are good, and the buffet is usually diverse, and although it has theme nights, you can still find the basics there as well. While on the subject of pizza, in the piazza on deck 6 you can find Alfredo's. This pizzeria is part of the casualty dining experience, so there is an extra cost if you eat there. It serves full pizzas from traditional pizza ovens, but the selection is usually limited to 3 or 4 different flavors. Up on the Lido deck, deck 16, and that's the one with the pools for those of you unfamiliar with nautical terminology, you also have the Mermaid Bar and the Sea Walk Bar. The first is just their pool bar, but the Sea Walk sits by a glass walkway that extends over the side of the ship and does offer some unique views as, you go sailing by. There are 2 small pools on the Lido deck, the Fountains Pool and the Plunge Pool. Both are surrounded by a water fountain in the center. Additionally, there are 2 pools on the 17th deck, the Terrace Pool and the Retreat Pool, the latter of which is part of the spa complex. The 17th deck also houses some of the hot tubs, the main kids area on board, as well as the Movies Under the Stars screen. This was a novel concept when Princess debuted it, but now almost every cruise line does something similar. The service on board for this particular cruise was honestly a little bit hit or miss. Some of the staff were incredibly attentive, while others basically ignored you completely until you went out of your way to flag them down. I unfortunately had the latter experience more than the first, but for those who did put in the effort, the service was quite incredible. So, a little bit about the Love Boat for those of you who are either too young to remember or from a country where the Love Boat didn't air. So The Love Boat was a TV show that ran from September 1977 to May of 1986. It was a romantic comedy which followed the crew of the Pacific Princess as they sailed with different plots and antics every week. The regular crew was fairly small. Captain Steubing was the leader of the bunch, and while he seemed no nonsense, he was really a softie who loved his crew and his adopted daughter Vicky. Vicky joined on in Season 3 after guest appearance in Season 2 and was taken under the wing of Julie, who was the cruise director on board, although all of the characters kind of looked after her. Dr. Adam Bricker, known as Doc by the crew, was the ship's doctor and the Don Juan on board. He was also the captain's best friend. Burl Smith, known as Gopher, was the yeoman purser in the first 7 seasons and the chief purser for the last 2. He was often kind of the comic relief of the crew. Isaac Washington was the bartender and often wound up as the foil to Gopher's antics. He also acted as a plot device in that the ship's passengers often bared their souls to him while waiting for drinks. Julie McCoy, as mentioned, was the cruise director for seasons 1 through 7. She often wound up as the female love interest of various passengers or had love interests of her own, which created subplots. In seasons 8 and 9, she was replaced by Jodie McCoy, the character's younger sister. Off-screen, this was due to the actress playing Julie having a cocaine addiction, which affected her performance on set. Ashley Covington Evans, known as Ace, was the last crew member that was added as a kind of full-time crew member, and he was the ship's photographer and joined in Season 7. He wound up being kind of a rival for Doc, but also an additional foil for Gopher. The characters of Captain Steubing, Doc, and Isaac are the only ones to appear in every single episode of the show, the 4 TV specials, and the made-for-TV movie. Gopher appeared in every single episode of the TV show, but did not appear in the specials or the made-for-TV movie, as he was running for the U.S. House of Representatives, where he wound up serving 4 terms. Princess allowed the use of both the Pacific Princess and the Island Princess for the show, and you could always tell which one it was when you got the aerial shots looking down at the ship based on the shape of the pool. The Pacific Princess had rounded pools, and the Island Princess had a more square pool. They also allowed numerous uses of their logo, which is known as the Sea Witch. Each episode contained 3 main storylines, and each story focused on either crew interactions, crew and passenger interactions, single passenger's experience, or a group of passengers. Usually, the plot revolved around a soured relationship with a reconciliation by the end. Some of the more prolific guest stars were Marion Ross, who had 14 appearances on the show, Florence Henderson, who had 10 appearances on the show, and Charo, with 11 appearances, where for 10 of them she played April, and one of them she played herself. As mentioned earlier, the actors who played Captain Stubing, Vicky Stubing, Doc, Gopher, Isaac, and Julie became the godparents and christening crew of the Regal Princess in 2014. So, unlike some other themed cruises, which are run by separate companies from the cruise line, this one was actually run by Princess Cruises directly. They did all the marketing for it, they put it together on their own, and they ran it. This is also the third official Love Boat cruise that Princess has run. It was a 7-night cruise leaving from Galveston, Texas, and going to Cozumel, Mexico, where we stayed for 2 days, and then Roatan in Honduras, where we were in port for 1 day before we returned to Galveston. Along the way, we also had 3 sea days. The cruise had some Love Boat themed activities, including a drinks mixing session with Fred Lange, Love Boat themed trivia with Julie Wieland, and a special performance by Charo. In addition to those events, episodes of Love Boat played on the Movie Under the Stars screen. They had Love Boat karaoke, and Love Boat was available to watch on your in-room stateroom. But I'll cover all of that in a moment. First, the cruise itself. For this cruise, it was 7 days, 8 nights. This included the first day in Galveston, Texas, and this meant that we got 3 port days and 3 sea days. The ports for this sailing were, as I mentioned earlier, Cozumel in Mexico, where we spent 2 days, and Roatan in Honduras, where we spent 1. Both of those are going to get episodes on the podcast later, so I will just state that both are fun ports and are good stops on any Western Caribbean itinerary, and you can see some of those pictures here as I talk about other things. So for the rest of the cruise, it was a standard cruise with some Love Boat sprinkled in. It started off with a sail away party where the Love Boat stars hosted. Jill Whelan got involved in some of the game shows throughout the week and even joined in as a co-host for the Love Boat karaoke. The rest of the crew did themed events as well. Ted Lange did a cocktail mixing class. But unlike other chartered cruises, like the Star Trek cruise or the Comic-Con cruise, what this really meant was that this wasn't all Love Boat all the time. And you can also see this kind of in how Princess marketed this cruise. Originally, this was not marketed as the Love Boat cruise. That piece of marketing came later, and as a result, you had people on board who had no clue that they were booked on the Love Boat cruise. On the first At Sea night, Charo put together a spectacular performance. She's a classically trained Spanish guitarist, and her musicality is second to none. It was a fun time, and the crowd was eager for more. And, you know, it was a good show. There were meet and greet sessions throughout the 7 days where you got a chance to meet the stars, you could get an autograph, a photo, chat for a few moments. I had a chance to talk to Fred Grandy for a short while as he was walking the ship and managed to pass on a greeting from a mutual friend, which he thanked me for. Unlike Star Trek The Cruise, which I have been on 3 now, you didn't see the Love Boat stars around the ship as much when they weren't doing something on stage. There was very little ability to interact with them outside of the scheduled times. And again, this is understandable as the passengers were not 100% there for the Love Boat cruise. And some were just there for regular cruising. You know, unlike, for example, Star Trek The Cruise or Comic-Con The Cruise, which everyone is there for Star Trek or Comic-Con. What this does, though, is it makes it feel much more like a regular cruise as opposed to a chartered themed cruise. And this is kind of borne out, again, in the fact that Princess themselves planned and sold this cruise. Unlike the Star Trek cruise, the Comic-Con cruise, which is chartered and then sold by Entertainment Cruise Productions. This isn't to say that it was a bad cruise, and it absolutely wasn't, but it does have a different feel from a truly chartered cruise. Part of this is also that Princess has, for decades, been playing hard into the Love Boat theme, with their ship's whistles playing the Love Boat theme on departure. And there is plenty of Love Boat paraphernalia around the ship. So this then brings us to the end of this episode, and I do hope that you've enjoyed about this chance to learn a little bit about the Regal Princess and the Love Boat cruise. And I hope that I've enticed you to possibly book a trip with Princess Cruises yourself. They're a good cruise line, they have a lot of amazing itineraries, and I highly recommend them. So thank you for joining me on this 7th episode of the Globetrotting with Lynx YouTube channel. I hope that you enjoyed listening as much as I did actually traveling to these wonderful locations and recording this episode. I would again like to thank our sponsors, Mal Books and Baronial Productions, for their support. And remember, if you want some help making your travel dreams come true, feel free to email me at lynx@globetrottingwithlynx.com. That's LYNX. Until next time, please keep having amazing travel adventures and enjoying your own globetrotting. This is Lynx saying, travel safe and have fun.